Sometimes parents, we just fail at advice. I remember my mom when I was a kid. She used to give me good advice too late. Think about it. Good advice too late. Like when I was a kid, I hit my head on the corner of the table. Careful! Imagine kids not whining. No screaming fits or squeals when they don't get the toy they want in their Happy Meals. Imagine all the parents burning down Chuck E. Cheese. God gave me this song. Boys, they just make up games like they want to hurt themselves. They do. I'm like out in the backyard one time, my son comes out, "Hey, Dad, throw that brick at me and see if I can get out of the way." Yeah. It's called Dodge Brick. It's great. Fling one right at my head and don't tell me when you throw it. I'll try to listen for the whiz. Don't you judge me. Because it wasn't until that brick left my hand I was thinking, this is probably not a good idea. Whoa! Careful! Yeah.
I love him. If he comes through here every once in a while. If you've never seen him, he's awesome. He's really funny. Anyway, I'm glad you guys are back. Hello. If you haven't been here before, my name's Halley, and this is week 3 of a actually 4-part series. So tonight we get to talk about some new stuff, which is awesome. But let's start with a prayer. Help us focus, okay? Dear God, thank you so much for bringing us into your house tonight. Thank you for the sunshine today. Thank you for the love that we feel in our hearts for this church, for your love, for our families and our children. Help us to learn new things and to show our positive feelings as much as we possibly can, and not to think so much about the negative things that weigh us down. Help us to know that you're always there to help buoy us, and help us to learn and that knowledge can be found in your word. We love you, Lord Jesus. Thank you for being with us. Amen. All right, so we're going to come back and look at some things tonight. We're going to start with a Bible verse so we can help organize ourselves. This one is perfect. Once again, we can find perfect things stuck right there in the Bible. So tonight we're going to read Hebrews 12, verses 5 through 6. So I need your help. So let's read this one together, okay? And have you entirely forgotten the encouraging words God spoke to you, his children? He said, "My child, don't ignore it when the Lord disciplines you, and don't be discouraged when he corrects you. For the Lord disciplines those he loves, and he punishes those he accepts as his children." And that was one thing that helps me think about, and I think that this is so totally true. God's trying to tell us that really is how we show our love. Creating healthy boundaries and expectations. Kids feel more peace. They feel like they understand what's going on when they see our discipline. And that is a way that we can show love. I remember back when I was a young lady, but I used to dance. I did ballet for a long time, till I was 17. And that was we had the kind of old-fashioned Russian instructor that would pound the stick on the floor. And I remember that you knew that you weren't very good if the instructor completely ignored you. Like you never heard anything. You never heard anything from the instructor. But when the instructor started yelling at you, giving you instruction, that was when you knew that you were doing things correct. So you knew when they started giving you corrective feedback that you were doing something, like you got the attention of people. And so I think that sometimes we don't recognize that when we are giving feedback, we're actually helping them to know, like, oh, okay, they love me, they have my attention. And so that's important. All right, tonight we're going to be talking about some new stuff, but let's go back and review. It's always good to review where we've come, especially if there are people here who weren't at one of the other 2 sessions. And just to let you know, even if you were here or if you weren't, they have these recorded. So if you want to go back and watch, or if you missed one, they have them if you go to the Hope website on Parenting on Purpose, there's the videos from the last 2 classes. And also, I guess they're going to also upload it to the Hope YouTube channel. So I haven't gone out there to look at them, but they're out there. So yay, if you missed something, you can see it. Okay, so let's go back. And I'm going to ask you again, if you were here the last 2 times, there's one thing that I want you to remember. So if behaviors of your children start to go south, what's the first thing you should do? Increase the positives. And I want you to leave here knowing that as soon as things start feeling like they're going not so great, I want you to increase the positives. That's really important because, like I said, that is not what we tend to do. So you have to keep reminding yourself of that. We talked about structure and predictability as far as setting that foundation, which you can do through house rules. And I just happened to be out there last weekend, that in the children and family area, they actually have a sheet for house rules where you can fill in your own. I was like, look at that, they're so on top of it. So house rules is a great way to set that up. Increased teaching, we talked about using the positive jar, doing 10 positives each day, and daily prayer. Now we're on week 3, and that came up week 1. So we may already have kind of started, like sometimes after you first hear it, you're like, oh, and you do it, and it's great, and you remember it, and then it kind of slumps off over time. So this is your rejuvenation. Get back to it. Keep it up. Do it again. Remember to increase those 10 positives or the positive jar if you're using that, because we're going to be adding in some more of those teachings. So you want to remain positive even throughout as you add new teaching. All right, then last week, we talked about those stop behaviors. And we introduced using 1, 2, 3 magic because that was an easy way to handle all stop behaviors. It was a nice, simple way to think about it. And so remember, you can always respond to an inappropriate behavior by telling them what you want them to do. So let's say they look like they're going to get angry or something, and typically in the past, they've hit their sister. Let's say that's what it is. You can tell they're getting angry, so you give them the do statement. Hands down, please, because you know the whack's coming. Hands down, please. So you gave them a nice little reminder what you wanted them to do. If it's okay, I gave a bad example because if it's a hit, of course you're going to go right to a 3. Okay, anything that hurts others, you're going to go right to a 3. So let's say it was something else. Let's say it was they're on the floor having a temper tantrum. Okay, so you're going to say that's 1. You're going to wait 5 seconds. You're not going to say anything. That's 1. You're going to count to 5. Then you're going to look at them, and if they haven't stopped, you're going to say that's 2. And you're going to wait. Now, if at any time they stop, just walk away. Be happy. Yay, it worked. But if they don't stop, you're going to wait 5 seconds, and you're going to say that's 3, and you're going to have a timeout. The timeout is a minute per year of age, but you do an automatic 3 if it's a hurting other behavior. Oh, it's my earrings. You can hear them flopping around. I'm going to take them off. Remember, no talking and no emotion. So that's the hardest part through all of this. No extra talking, and try very hard to have just a calm face. It gets easier over time, I promise you, but it takes a little practice for that to happen. And then when you're done with the timeout, welcome your child back. Be happy to see them. That's important. And you just don't talk about it. There's no need to talk about it. It's like a do-over. Do-over for everybody. You're happy. They're happy. Let's pretend it never happened. And hopefully you won't have another timeout in the next, hour or so at least. Okay, so tonight, we're going to talk about start behaviors. So we talked about stop, anything you want to stop. Whining, temper tantrums, talking back, hitting, kicking, any of those things that are just things you just want to stop. Tonight is start, and those are anything that usually these things, you can't do them in the same way because they have multiple parts. And these are the things that, like getting out of the house in the morning, getting to bed, like doing all the routine steps to get to bed, doing their chores, doing their homework, anything that has those multiple pieces that you need them to get started on doing. So that's what we're talking about tonight. Now, I did have a conversation in the back talking about if you have an older kid. Normally, the stop behaviors that I talked about earlier, I usually said that that's really good for between the ages of 18 months and 12. That's a great system. The things we're going to talk about tonight work all the way up even into adulthood. So this has no age limit on it. These are things that you probably do as an adult that hopefully you learned over time. So we're going to be teaching this at a lower level, of course, for if you have very young children. But if you have older kids, 10, 14, these things will work the same. You don't have to do it as juvenile, of course, but these work really well. These are also really good independence-building activities. So we're going to talk about that too. All right, so what we want to do for all start behaviors is we need to add in our expectations and predictability. Now, typically when we want kids to do a start behavior, so I'll pick getting out of the house. That tends to be one of the hardest things, really, is getting out of the house, going wherever it is, whether you're going to practice for something, whether you're getting out of the door to go to school or drop off or whatever it is. That tends to be a really difficult time. But whatever your start behavior is you can tell it's something you need to work on if you're having to remind them over and over again, and they're forgetting pieces. Or you're having to tell them, like, the next thing to do. Or they keep forgetting parts. So what we need to do is we need to structure up our expectations and predictability to build independence, meaning they don't have to wait for us to tell them what to do. They already know what to do, okay? And they take that responsibility on themselves. So there's a few special techniques in here that we'll use to help that. So first of all, we have to be clear with our expectations. So we're going to talk about how to do that. You also need to get input on deadlines. So if you have an older child, I would say even as young as 6 sometimes, you can figure out a deadline. When do they need to have things done by? So let's say you're doing that start behavior for getting out the door to go to school, okay? So you know they have to go out the door. We need to be, whether it's that you take them someplace or they have to go to the bus stop, let's say. So they have to be out the door by, let's just say 8 o'clock. You know that. They have to be out the door. So what time do you need them to be done with all their expectations? You don't want it to be right at 8 o'clock. That gives you no buffer, right? There's no buffer zone there. So you might ask for their input and say, okay, we have to be out the door by 8 o'clock. So what time do you think you should have all your things done by? Ask for their input. They might say 7:55. You might think, I don't know, that gives us enough time. You can say that and say, I'm not sure that'll give you enough time. What if it's not working out that day? I don't want you to feel rushed. But you also might think, okay, we'll give it a shot. You said 7:55. Let's give it a shot if you think you can get everything done by then. So it's okay to start that. It doesn't mean that you won't change things if it's not going well. But you want to have some buy-in. So if they're 6 or up, you want to have a discussion and have them have a little bit of input. If you can negotiate back and forth if you think, well, but you can always try it. And if it's not going well, then be like, I think we need to revisit this. We're going to talk a lot about using visuals. Visuals are key. Now, visuals for younger kids are going to look different. If they're not a reader yet, you have to add pictures in. If you have children who are beginning readers, you might have a combination of words and pictures together. But if you have kids who are fairly solid readers, I'm going to encourage you to go right to a checklist because you want to teach them how to handle figuring out what they have to do with a checklist on their own. So we're going to talk about using that. And the key thing is we want the reminders to come from themselves and not from us. Because probably right now, with one thing you're struggling with as far as the start behavior, all the reminders are coming from you. So the key is going to be that as we're talking about these reminders, is that whenever a child needs a reminder, right now what you're probably doing is you're telling them the parts that would be on a list. Because in your head, you have a list. You have this is what we have to get done before school. You know what those things are. You've got this mental list. So you're telling them what's in the list. Now we need to transfer that list to something they can be responsible for. So once we have that transferred, and we'll talk about that, then your reminder is not going to be, you need to blah, and you tell them the next thing on the list. Your reminder is going to be, you need to go check your list. What's next? So it's their responsibility to go look and figure it out. So we're going to talk about that as we get closer. That's going to build in that whole, your only reminder is going to be, go check your list. So it clears it up for you. Makes your reminders a lot clearer, but it also puts the responsibility on them to go see where they are. All right, so for routines, I want you to target something that is something that you're reminding a lot about right now. So you may have multiple routines that could probably use these strategies. Don't overwhelm yourself and go home and be like, I'm going to target all of them. That might be a little too overwhelming for you and for the child. I would pick one to start, and then as that one feels good, you can add another. And then add it on until you feel like things are going pretty well. But you want to pick the one that you feel you're reminding the most about. So pick the hardest one, basically. If it's the hardest one, pick that one to target. Plus, it's going to make you feel a lot better when that hardest one is taken care of. You're going to feel like, okay, it's off my plate now. So you're going to figure out which one you want to target. Then you need to establish the steps the child needs to complete. I was telling Pastor Ben earlier today, I love doing this stuff. I'm really weird, but I enjoy taking a problem behavior and breaking it down into little pieces. It's kind of what I like to do. I find kids to be little puzzles, and I like to figure them out and figure out all those little pieces. But for a lot of us, this is kind of hard. Like we think on the fly, a lot of people do. So I want you to figure out that routine. So let's say it's getting out of the house in the morning. You need to figure out what steps they need to complete to be ready. So let's say for your child, it is, maybe your child is a little bit older, so they can do a lot of things on their own. So their job is to brush their teeth, get dressed, make their bed, eat breakfast, put everything in their backpack, put their shoes on, and now this time of year, put their snow gear in the other bag, okay? Because we're getting that time of year. So there's 7 things on your list they need to complete. Your routine might have different things, like maybe they have to get their water bottle in there, or they have to get their practice gear together, or they have to, there's lots of different things that could be different in your house than it is what I just said. So you need to figure out what those steps are. You probably have a good idea because you already have that mental list. You're the one that always realizes what they're forgetting. It could be they have to make their lunch and put it in their backpack. So whatever it is for your house, you need to break down those steps, okay? Also, if you have older kids, it's a good time to get input. What are the steps? What are we missing? This is what I think we need to do every morning. What am I missing? See if they come up with something. They might come up with something. Sometimes they do, and it's amazing. You're like, yeah, I totally would not have thought of that. Or it might even be an extra thing that you're like, I wasn't even going to push for that, but okay. Because they brought it up, they're going to have more buy-in. Then you want to create a visual that you're going to use for teaching and building independence. Like I said, if they're young, you're going to need to add in some kind of pictures with it. You can pull those off of anything, Google Images. I don't care what it is. You can even draw it in your sad little drawing. I can't draw with a darn, but I draw all the time for kids. And as soon as I tell them what it is, they totally know what it is. And they remember it. And for your, like I said, your beginning readers, you might have both a picture and a word. For your older kids, you might just have a list. I would usually have some part on there. If it's just a list, or actually for any of my kids, I always put a little box next to it like a checkbox. Because for a while, you're going to want them to actually check it off or strike through it while they're learning it. Over time, as they get good at it, they're probably not going to have to check it off every day. They're going to get it. But if you start running into trouble, you can go back to checking it off or striking through. So you just decide, and you can go with what you like better. What do you like better? Do you like checking things off? Do you like striking it through? What do you like to do? Xing it out? I don't care what you do. And you need to decide on a beginning time. Now, what I mean by that is, if thinking about that, getting up and out in the morning, and you've decided those 7 things they needed to do, and you figured out your buffer time, like, okay, so 7:55, we said, is when we want to be done by. So when do we think we need to start? You're going to have some history because you know your typical routine. Maybe you guys start that stuff at 7. I don't know. Let's just use that as a round time, okay? So I want you to say, okay, at 7 o'clock, you're going to start doing your jobs. You might have an early waker that's been up a while by that point. You might have a very late sleeper, and 7 is the moment they wake up. It's totally okay, but you need to decide when the beginning time is for these jobs. Because you may have in your household 3 different kids. They may have the same steps in their routine. You may have a slow mover. You might have a distractible kid. And you might have a Johnny on the spot. It's going to get it done right away. So they might move at 3 different paces. That's totally okay. But you're going to want to negotiate your time. They don't have to all start. At the beginning, you might all start at the same time. So you say, 7 o'clock, we're going to get started, which is fine. And let's say I would encourage you that whatever that start time is that you set an alarm. It's not you saying when the start time is. Because if it's you saying when the start time is, once again, you're the reminder. They aren't becoming independent with starting. So even if they've been up a while or whatever, you have an alarm clock maybe set upstairs or someplace that the alarm goes off at 7. When the alarm goes off, at first, you're going to probably have to say, hey, what does that mean? You talked about this. That means we need to get started on our checklist. But that will be your reminder time. Because over time, you want to build it in that they hear the alarm and they know they need to get started on their stuff. It could be that that's actually their wake-up alarm because you've got that wake up right at 7 kid, which is totally fine. As you're going along, you can adjust your beginning time. So remember we talked about we have slow movers, we have Johnny on the spots, we have different kinds of kids. The time does not have to stay the same for everybody. So if you have your Johnny on the spot kid and you start at 7, he might be done by 7:15. He's fast. So then I'd have a conversation with him and be like, hey, you are like done. You've got, a whole 45 minutes before you have to go. Now, we can keep doing it at 7 and then you can have 45 minutes to play, which is great if that's what you want. Or we can adjust your time back. So I would let them have the option. So you could get started a little later if you want. So let's push it back 15 minutes if that's what they want to do. If they just want to get up at 7 and have 45 minutes to play, that's fine too. But you guys can think about that. Now your slow-moving kid, so let's say he starts at 7. 7:55 comes. He's only halfway through the list. This has not been an easy go of it. So that is your discussion about, okay, this did not work, clearly. We need to back up our time. We only got halfway through the list, so I think we need a lot of time. So tomorrow, we're going to get started at 6:30. Your brother isn't starting until 7:30 because he's Johnny on the spot. You're going to start at 6:30 because you need that amount of time to get going. So, and say, hey, but if you start getting used to this and you're doing really well on your checklist, we can always adjust it back. That's totally fine. But we need to make sure that you have enough time to get your stuff done. So you move him back to 6:30. So you just adjust based upon the kids. So you would have different alarms. They could have them in their room. They could have them wherever. You have different alarms for different kids. But that is how you typically use that. You adjust the time frame because, in general, that's how you want them to be when they're like teenagers, right? They can adjust. If I need more time, I need to give myself more time. If I get it done quickly, I can do other things that I want to do, or I can adjust back. That's a life skill that we want them to learn. A lot of times we don't think about talking through that with our kids. We just make those adjustments for them. And then those are the kids that typically struggle when they get into high school and they have to adjust a lot of their time on their own, usually around practices and in between, like practice and schoolwork and balancing things. They have a hard time adjusting their time frame because they haven't had a lot of experience with it because they haven't ever had to manage it on their own. So you're trying to build these life skills in before they have to use them, okay? So that's kind of what that means. Now we're going to go through and talk about this a little more in depth so that you have a little more information. I can never remember. I'm really good about this at home, and then I get here and I think, what's my next thing? Oh, okay, it's a visual. All right. So this is just a visual for a bedtime routine, clearly for a younger child because it's got pictures on there. But this is one that they had written down. If you go on that Pinterest page, which I talked about, Allison space Halley, remember it's Allyson space Halley, Halley. The other one has one L, and she's very fashionable and not me. I'm the one not fashionable, has all this stuff on there. It's under the for class page. There are a billion of these routine examples. If they work for you, great. But you can just make your own up. I was not nearly so fancy as this. But I loved it when you had something like this. You can very easily stick that, just a regular sized piece of paper, inside a frame, like a picture frame. And on the glass, they can use a dry erase marker and strike through it or make a check mark and then just erase it. That works really well, if putting it in a picture frame and stand it up wherever they need to have it. I wasn't even that fancy. I would use like one of those page protectors. I'd just slip it in a page protector and slap it on the bathroom mirror, and they had to do it that way. I was not super crafty. But there's other people out there have the craftiest ideas. But this is just a routine that they had identified this is what they need to do for this particular kiddo. I think I might have one more. I do. So this is an older child. So clearly they have a lot more things to get done as an older child. A lot more things to pay attention to, but they can easily read it, figure out what they need to do. You have an established start time when they need to be in bed by, and if they're not in bed by that time, you adjust your start time. Oh, I guess you have to start a little earlier, getting ready for bed. We're not quite meeting our, whatever the established bedtime is in your household. So just some examples of what those would look like. Okay, so thinking about that, I want you to kind of think, now the cool thing is that, so having these like routines, these start behaviors are exactly the same. So remember how in stop behaviors you could do all the things in the same way with one routine with the 1, 2, 3 magic? All start behaviors you can do in a very similar way. You just have to identify the steps. You need to be clear about what they are. You need to establish your expectation and then set it up so that they know what the routines are. Now remember, as you get started, they're going to need a little practice. You're going to need to set it up for them. You're going to need to say, hey, we're starting a new routine. I think you can do this. So even if it's a 4-year-old, you can say you're big enough to be able to do this now. You can do this with someone as young as 3. I don't typically do it with kids under 3, but I do it for 3-year-olds. Now, you may not have a whole lot of things on there, but you have things on there that they're responsible for. Because eventually you're going to add more and more things that they can be responsible for. But you just have a talk and say, hey, I don't like having to remind you about things. You don't like it when I remind you about things. I want you to be able to handle this on your own, so we're going to build this in. You talk about establishing it, If they want to help you establish some of these things, great. Sometimes they don't even want to talk about it. They're like, what, fine, whatever. You kind of get that whole thing. Okay, if you don't want to be a part of it, I'll help establish some of those expectations. And then you'll say, okay, we're going to put this into place. We're starting it tomorrow. Your alarm's going to go off. I'm going to expect you to do all these things. Now, at the beginning, you're going to say, hey, because this is the beginning, I'm going to want you to, this is a nightly one, so let's use this example. So tonight, we're going to start, let's say it's an older kid, so their bedtime is, say, 9:30, okay? So you're going to say, so their start time to get ready is 8:30, just as an example. So you're going to say at 8:30, either, an alarm doesn't have to go off at night, but whatever is going to show you that it's 8:30. If they are older, they might have a phone and a bell, the alarm goes off. So at 8:30, you're going to get started. Now, I'm going to remind you that you have to get started because this is your first few times doing this. I want you to actually check off the things. As you get them done, I want you to check them off. When you get to bed, I want to see the checklist. I want to see that you've done them all, so we know that it happened. I might even check to see if it happened at the beginning so that I know that you haven't forgotten something. As we get better at this, we're not going to have to always do that, but for a while, I need you to check it off. If we're having problems, I'm going to have to check your work, kind of like they do at school. If we're not having problems, I totally take it. Yeah, that's fine. You're done. Super. Great. Head off to bed. So at the beginning, I really have them check it all off. And like I said, if you're having problems that you think they just maybe checked it off, that happens sometimes, they just check it off and they go to bed, you might have to go and actually check it. And if they forgot something, usually what I'll do is I'll just leave it all checked off like they had, and I'll hand it back to them and say, hey, you forgot something. I need you to check your work. I don't tell them what it was that they forgot. I hand it back to them, their checklist, and say, you need to go check something that you forgot. Now, if they figure it out really fast and they take care of it, fine. If it takes a long time for them to figure out what it was that they forgot, I'm going to adjust bedtime for the next night. I say, gosh, you know what? That took longer than I anticipated. I think we're going to need to adjust our bedtime for tomorrow night. We're going to have to get started 15 minutes earlier. Until we get this right, maybe you need a little more time, kind of thing. If you start speeding it up, great, we can push it back. So that they start getting the feeling like, oh, okay, I really have to do this. And remember, your reminder is always, so let's say you see them not getting started. Your alarm has gone off at 8:30, or you told them at 8:30 that they're supposed to start. They're still sitting around, not doing anything. And in your gut, you're going to want to say, you need to go get your homework in your backpack, because that's probably been what you've been used to doing, is telling them the things that they need to do. Instead, you're going to say, I need you to go check your checklist, or whatever you call it. So instead of saying, go put these things in, I'm going to say, go check your checklist. I want you to limit to saying, go check your checklist to 3 times. If they're not doing anything and they're not getting it done, your best action, so you can say it 3 times, then if you get to that time, the timer goes off, time for bed, they're not finished, they have to keep doing it. Granted, they're going to get to bed later that night. You're going to tell them, oh, sorry, you got to get it done. They're going to go to bed later. But you're going to adjust the bedtime earlier for the next night. If it took them a long time, you can even say, oh gosh, your timer's up. Let's see how long it takes you to get this finished, because that's going to be how long we have to go to bed earlier tomorrow night. Sometimes that will encourage them to get going a little faster. Like I said, I only want you to remind them 3 times, and you're only going to remind them to check their checklist. You're not going to tell them the parts of the checklist. However, sometimes you're going to have kids that ask you, Mom, what do I need to do next? They kind of want you to be involved. They like you to be involved. We have kids like that all the time. They don't mind doing it so much if somebody is there sort of talking to them while they do it. So for those kids, if they ask you a lot, your answer is always going to be, go check your checklist. Now, give them positive praise, because if they're coming to you a lot to find out what's happening, they probably want your interaction. So you want it to be something good, right? So if they're coming to you a bunch, go check your checklist. And then occasionally throw in a positive, like, hey, you're really like working fast through that. That's fantastic. Or wow, that's awesome. Thank you for doing that. So little things, throw in little positives, walk by, give them a little attention. So that's going to make them feel pretty good through that, okay? The same idea is going to work well also for chores. So we've talked about routines, activities, those kinds of things. The same thing will work well for chores. I kind of put chores and homework together because they are doing work. They're not exactly the same thing because I don't treat them exactly the same. Chores are something you're going to have to do no matter what. Homework happens whenever school decides it's going to happen. Okay? So for me, chores are extremely important. And I've got a couple videos here to tell you why. So I'm going to show you this next one, and it's a couple videos, and then we're going to talk a little bit more about chores. It follows the same routine, basically, but a little bit different for chores, okay? So let's watch this video. I think it's like, oh, there's one more. Awesome. There's just one more idea of like a morning routine. Oh, I like this one too because it was a little different. And I have made some of these before, especially if you have kids who are really like hands-on. The whole closing thing is sometimes fun. It depends how crafty you are. That's too much for me. I can't handle it. Okay, so chores. So why are they important? So we're going to watch this quick video from Harvard. I just like that because a lot of times, so I'm a big lover of Love and Logic, if you know their resources. And they do a lot about talking about how important chores are. And a lot of times in our generation, because kids are very busy with a lot of activities. They have a lot of school activities, there's a lot of homework that comes with that, and they're usually involved in a lot of extracurricular activities, which may be slightly different than when you were a kid. Maybe you weren't quite as busy as that. But what seems to be the norm now in society is that parents' view is school is your job. And our kids have very little exposure to chores, we're finding out, as they do a lot of research right now, is that kids have less and less chores. And so I am going to encourage you to set up some chores, because it is very important for their self-image and that they understand that as a part of your family, they need to do some work to help the family work well. It will give them more self-esteem as part of the family. It will help them feel more connected to the family and that they have some output into the good of the house. If you don't have kids do chores, what tends to happen is not what we think. So if your child is super busy, we often think as a parent, well, they're so busy, I don't want to have them have to say, like, put the dishes in the dishwasher or whatever it is. They're so busy. They have a lot of homework to do. Well, what happens is we think like, oh, we're doing them a favor, and they're of course going to notice this and recognize that this is a wonderful thing. What actually happens is they become to feel sort of entitled, like that kind of thing just happens all the time, and they don't even notice that it's happening. And they think that people are going to kind of do those things for them randomly throughout their life. So I really, really think chores are super important. So we're going to talk a little bit about, plus all that stuff from Harvard, I was like, that's pretty awesome. It actually makes you feel happier and more productive in life. So the same start rules apply for chores. You want to set up clear expectations of your chores. You can set up clear completion times, and you can negotiate that. So, for instance, if you set up a chore, and we're going to talk about daily chores and weekly chores. Let's say you set up a daily chore, and your chore is taking out the garbage. Like you take the garbage from the kitchen out to the garage, or wherever you take it. That's your chore. You set up a completion time. So you decide that I want you to have that done by, I don't know if it's before you go to bed, or you decide you need to have it done by dinner time. Just some kind of completion date, time. I need you to have it done by this particular time. And you can negotiate it. You can talk to them and say, how does it, do you think you can have it done by that time? If they say no, then you're like, well, when do you think you can have it done by? Have them come up with a completion time they can have it done by. Now, littler kids, you might just have to establish that completion time. Now, things like feeding the dog, that has to be done by a certain time, right? If they don't feed the dog doesn't get fed. So if your dog needs to get fed by dinner time, then that's the expectation. That might not be a negotiable aspect. I do want you to think about, if you haven't already established one, every child in your family should have a daily chore and a weekly chore. I want them to do both. Oftentimes, if you have a multitude of kids in your house, and you have olders and youngers, or if you have like a big age gap between some of your kids, I find that pairing up older and younger kids is actually really fun for them, for some of those harder tasks. So our weekly chores typically would be bigger things. Like it might be that they have to clean up the playroom, or they have to clean their room, or they have to dust the house, or they have to vacuum the family room, or the biggest one in our house that everyone did not want was pooper scoop. So we always had a lot of kids in our house, and so we would often pair the older and the younger together, because I know if I sent the 3-year-old out to pooper scoop, it's not going to be done very well. Plus, who knows what's going to happen out there with the kid with a bag and the shovel. So we always paired our kids together, an older and a younger, and they would work together on some tasks. So you can do that. And also it is kind of a fun bonding thing when you're paired up with something, and then we would shift who the pairs were. Some kids work together really well, some kids don't work together very well, but no matter what, they have to get it done by whatever the prescribed time is. Changing chores is good. So in our house, we typically had like certain daily chores. One was like going to get the mail. That was always a favorite one because that was easy. There were things like putting the dishes in the dishwasher, unloading the dishwasher, putting the things away. There was washing the pots and pans. There was taking the garbage out. There was feeding the dog. We always had to have at least 6 because we sometimes had that many kids in the house. So those were some of our daily chores. If you have a chore that you have a hard time letting go with the way it needs to get done, this often happens with the dishwasher for some reason. I don't know why that is. Some people have a hard time letting go of the dishwasher. They need it to be a certain way, the way it's loaded. If that's the case, or sometimes it's making the bed, like you need to have it done a certain way, like you need it done this way. If that is something and you can't live with the way they're going to do it, if you're going to end up coming after them and redo it, don't ask them to do it. Don't ask anybody else to do it. That's your job now, from now on. If you can't live with how somebody else is doing it. Because if you have your child do that task, fill the dishwasher, get it started, and have it go, and it's going to drive you crazy enough that you're going to go in and redo it, what you've just told your child is, what you do isn't enough, just by your action. Or if you follow your spouse and redo it after they do it, you're also telling them how you do it is not good enough. So my thought to you is, if it's going to bother you, don't ask. It's now your job. You get to do that job. You can give them other things that you can live with. But like I said, it tends to be dishwashers, from what people have told me, the loading. Usually people are fine with unloading. Like, unloading's fine, so give that to a kid. Usually it's making the bed. Occasionally it's folding towels. People have a weird thing about how they want their towels folded. So, like I said, if that's your thing, don't give it to them. You can give them other stuff, okay? But don't redo it if they've done it some way, because you certainly want them to know that their effort was appreciated, however it came out, okay? Now, if they're being lazy and it's not like a persnickety thing and they're truly being lazy, you can talk a little bit of quality control. That's fine. You don't want a lot of junk left on your pots and pans. That's disgusting. So you have a talk about that. Hey, when we wash the pots and pans, you have to get all the food off of the inside, because if you don't, and I cook in that, that means next time I make spaghetti, we're going to have some of these eggs stuck in the spaghetti, and that's gross. So give it another shot and let me know when you think you're done, kind of thing. So you kind of want to explain it so they don't think you're going to either accept something that's still gross, or they can just get away with whatever. And a lot of times, honestly, kids just don't know. So like if they go to do the pots and pans the first time and you look at it and you're like, ugh, you might think, how could they not notice this? But they typically don't have experience cooking and they've never had experience washing it, so why would they know? So you need to point it out. See all this stuff there? That means it's not clean. Let me show you Mr. Brillo pad. There you go. This is how you do it. So you set up your clear expectations. Changing chores is good, meaning that let's say you have those daily routines, daily chores. There are always some that are easier than others. So my kids, they always wanted to go get the mail. They liked that one. So we always changed our daily chores once a week. That's what we did at our house. We had it on a list, and then we would change the chores down the side. So our kids were at the top, the chores were on the side, and we would just rotate them up every week. So you were going to get one of them. It just depended the week we were on. The weekly chores also, some are easier and less gross, like pooper scooping, than others. So you can stay with those however long you want, or you could rotate them on a weekly basis. We actually had negotiating skills for weekly chores. So kids could negotiate for what they wanted. And it was kind of fun. Teaching them how to negotiate politely and all that kind of stuff was kind of fun to hear what they would do. I'll take 2 chores if you will take my pooper scooping. And they're like, that's not good enough. You got to take more than 2 of my chores because I want to do it. So there was some good negotiating happening going on there. But that helps them to learn new skills when you change things up. It helps them not get into a rut, and because some are less fun than others. Okay? If you stay with the same one over and over and over, it gets kind of dull, and switch it up. All right, let me try. I think this is a video clip. Maybe? Oh, no, it's examples. Okay, so same thing. You want to use visuals about your chores. So this was somebody, it looks like, who is a younger child. So they have clothespins, and they put it from the to-do to the done side when they're done for each kid. Cool idea. I like it. And this might be somebody, if you still need pictures, in that picture frame like I talked about, they can just check it off. That's their chores or their to-do list that they had to do. It kind of looks like it might be a bit of a routine too. Now here's another thing. So if you have a big job, like cleaning a room, a bedroom, or a playroom, or a garage, our idea of what a clean bedroom may differ significantly from what your child's idea of what a clean bedroom looks like. So you need to be clear in your expectations. So at first, you might just say, hey, I want you to clean your bedroom, and I want you to make sure that your toys are put away, your clothes are put away, your bed is made. So you might just try it first verbally, see what happens. Now, if you get in there and stuff isn't quite finished, I want you to create a visual. And I want you to actually go through, well, this is what I expect. I expect that you make your bed. Sometimes you even have to show them. In our house, making a bed, because like I said, I had to give up some of my persnickety ways, minus the bed, is that in our house, a made bed consisted of, and I would show my children consisted of your pillows on the bed, the top cover is pulled up and over the bed. That's it. I don't care how lumpy it is underneath there. I don't care if everything's twisted up. 17 pairs of pajamas are in there. I don't care. The top thing is over the top and the pillow's on the bed. That was a made bed in our house. And I also knew the 17-year-old could do that and the 3-year-old could do that. So that was all I was expecting of made bed. My bed doesn't look like that. Theirs can look however they want. They have to get into it and it's nasty. But then, so if you have something that you want done a certain way, show it to them and tell them what it is. So cleaning the bed in this household looks like these things. The bed is made, you put away your clothes, you pick up the books, you picked up the stuffed animals, you pick up your toys, and you sweep them up. Your idea of a clean bedroom may be different than that. So you need to decide what that is. And if you have a list of things, make a list. It's way easier than having to tell them every time. And remember, you want them to build their own mental list. You don't want to be that one telling them. You also want to give them positive praise rather than negative correction. So if you walk in and stuff isn't done, it's easier to say, gosh, why don't you look at your list? Come back and tell me when you think it's done. And you come back out and come back in, you can give them positive praise. Or it could be, wow, it really looks like I think maybe 4 of these things are absolutely fantastic and I love it. There might be 2 more that we need to find. You walk out, kind of thing. So they have to figure it out and they have to do it. But be clear for those big jobs. Cleaning the playroom, cleaning your room. Talk about that. And teach them. All right. So what does it look like in practice? How to follow through. What do you do if they don't do it? Right? Yeah, easy to say. And what do you do if they don't do it? So I'm going to have you watch a quick video from Love and Logic.
How do we get the chores done? How about 2 simple little rules? Keep it as simple as possible. How about the first one? Starts with the word never. If you're going to write it down, write the word never, capital letters, underline it. One of the few times that we ever say never, absolutes. Okay? Never tell a kid to do the chores right now. Don't write that part. Okay. Teased you. Never say right now. Okay? That's a little easier. Never say do it now. Provide a deadline in the future, far enough in the future that you have plenty of time to figure out what you're going to do if he doesn't do it. Do you have any friends who say, do it now or else, and they don't have any idea what or else is? Yeah. I want plenty of time to figure that out. Because if I tell a kid, you do this or I'm going to do that, will he engineer it in such a way that this doesn't fit anymore and I feel like a jerk doing it? That's how you know your kid's normal, right? Okie-doke. So we've got a deadline in the future, far enough in advance I can figure out what to do if he doesn't do it. Rule number 2 is another never. Never remind. Today we said if you want your kids to listen, you say something once, and then something happens. And then if they say, but I didn't hear it, we say, how sad, I bet you'll listen better next time. There'll always be another time, okay? And this is what's going to happen. Okay. So let's talk about some of those deadlines. Would this be a reasonable deadline? Can you have the dishwasher unloaded and all the trash out by the end of the day? Would that be reasonable? Sure. Would you like your boss to talk to you like that? Okay. One of the first core principles of Love and Logic is we will do whatever we can to maintain both the dignity of the adult and the dignity of the child. And if so, we'll get a lot less resentment from them, okay? So how about having it done by the end of the day? Next step, go to prayer. Pray that they forget. Going to have a real world learning opportunity coming up here. Give me the courage not to blow it by reminding. And then now the end of the day comes, and the child goes to bed. It's okay. By the time I get up there to lay down some sincere, genuine empathy, I want that kid to be in a deep, deep sleep. Oh, sweetie, sweetie, this is such a bummer. What, Dad? I'm sleeping. Oh, this is so sad. What? I love, get them saying what. Then you know you got them. Okay, what? Oh, the dishes are still in the dishwasher. The trash hasn't been taken out. Time to get it done. And you'll find out the kids who are sound asleep a lot easier to work with than the ones who are wide awake. And nothing will warm your heart more than to watch him staggering out at 11 o'clock at night in the dark. Hopefully it's raining a little bit or something, and taking care of the job. And are you being angry or sad for them? Which is it? Sad? Oh, yeah. I hate to do it in the dark. Oh, boy. But I'll watch and make sure everything's fine, okay? Might even help you with the dishwasher. How do we get the chores done? How about 2 simple little rules? Keep it as simple as possible. How about the first one? Starts with the word.
I like what he said about that. I mean, so that tells you, what do you do if they don't happen? So that's why you have your set time of when you want it to be done by. And I did talk about you can refer them back to the list 3 times, but that's really at the beginning stage when you're training them on it. Once you have them going back to that, I want you to do it less and less. I really do want to get to that whole no reminders. It really should be, I use the rule of 3. So you can remind them back to the list 3 times, but within 3 days, you should not be reminding at all. You should be allowing them to have that expectation of the time happened, they didn't have it done, and now you're going to have some kind of reminder. So it could be that, like he said, they went to bed, you have to wake up, you have to get it done. It could be that if it was, they had to get it done before dinner, and they didn't get it done, you got to go do it now before you can eat. The rest of the family's eating. You need to go do it. We're going to sit down and eat. You finish your job. When you're done, you can come eat, kind of thing. It could be that if it's bedtime and it's running into bedtime and they've pushed it off, they have to do it. Their bedtime routine went late, which of course means tomorrow they have to start their bedtime routine earlier. So it has another consequence. So all that stuff sort of figures out. Now for the morning routines, the same thing has to happen, and that's such a bummer. Because if you have them getting up and to get their jobs done before their go-out time, then you have to set the alarm earlier. And that's a bummer for us because that means we have to be up earlier too. Sometimes I've had to push that back a half an hour and then 45 minutes and then an hour, and we're getting up earlier and earlier and earlier. But luckily, there comes a point at which they're starting to get things done. They recognize that, oh man, this isn't working. She's really making me get up earlier and earlier and earlier. And you have to get up earlier and earlier, but eventually they'll start going faster and faster, and then you can have that conversation of, hey, you kind of have this. How about we push it back 15 minutes? Push it back 15. They can still handle it, and tell them, hey, if you can still handle this, we can push it back even further. That's okay. But so you're just trying to help them learn through that, okay? But that's the other thing. Now, if, say, chores are not getting done and kids are going to get stubborn about it and they're just not going to do it, which happens sometimes, the best consequence for that, which I love is through love and logic, is that you have a consequence that, well, I love it that if I have to spend my time or my worry on something, you need to pay me back for it. So let's say your child had to mow the lawn and they had to get it done before they went to their game on Saturday. They forgot to do it. You've been past the 3 days, so you're not reminding them anymore. They went to their game. It clearly didn't happen. And you went out and you mowed the lawn. So they get back and you're like, oh man, this stinks because I had to spend my time mowing the lawn for you. So to pay me back, you're going to have to pay me back for my time. So you could pay me back by doing all these other chores I couldn't get done because I was doing your chore. And you'll have to do that now instead of going to your friends. Or you could pay me back in money, pay me back for my time, in money, if you want. You could pay me back in things. You've got a lot of video games, or you pay me back in screen time. You can pay me back in however you want. You can give some options. I love giving options. How are you going to pay me back? So you give them, I usually don't give more than 3 options. Here's your choices. You can take my chores that you can get done, and you're still expected to mow the lawn next weekend, plus my thing, so I add it up. They don't get 1 for 1. It's usually at least 2 for 1 or 3 for 1 because they forgot. So chores, pay me back monetarily, pay me back in materials or screen time kind of thing. So I let them choose, and they get to choose, and they have to pay me back. So those are some of the options that you can use. I like those a lot. If it continues to go on and on after that, I can give you some suggestions. Typically, they're looking to see, are you really going to hold me to it? That's really what they're looking for. Is a lot of times we try things as parents, and it didn't quite go how we planned, and then we kind of abandon it, and kids are used to that. So if you try it and you stick with it, they're really looking for, are they really going to make me do this? Do they really mean what they said? Which stinks for us because it means we have to actually mean what we said, and we have to follow through the way that we intended. So that's sort of what you do if they don't do their chores. But I want you to make sure that you set up a daily chore if you don't have it for your child, and a weekly chore for your child. And that is something that they have to have done no matter what the homework is. Chores come first before their stuff. It comes before homework. It comes before their extracurricular stuff. It's more important to be a part of the family than it is to be a part of the other stuff. Now, the other stuff is great. I think schoolwork is super, super important. I work in a school. It is important. I think the extracurriculars teach you all kinds of life lessons, and that is important. But that is not necessary for life. Being a part of a family is. And respecting your people that you love is. So that comes first. Everything else they can do. They might lose a little sleep, but they can do the other stuff too, but they're going to have to get on top of it. So those are some of the ideas, and we're going to go through real quick. Here's your wrap up. So don't forget the other things from the beginning. House rules, positive jar, 10 positive each day, daily prayer, 1, 2, 3 magic for those stop behaviors. The things I want you to remember are, if behavior goes south, increase the positives. That's right. 1, 2, 3 magic. What were the 2 things about 1, 2, 3 magic? No talking and no emotion. Oh, you guys are good at this. And if you're reminding a lot, you should create some kind of checklist or visual. Okay, look, you guys are so smart. You're totally getting this. All right. I think that must be the last slide I created. Look at that. So we have time for no, we don't really have much time. But if you have a question for me, I will stay after and you can talk to me about it. We will not have, next week is Thanksgiving, so we're not here. But the week after that, I'll be back one more time, and that time we're going to do kind of a review, and you can ask questions about any of the things we've talked about, the foundational stuff, the 1, 2, 3 magic, the start behaviors, and then we're going to have like tips and tricks that kind of don't fall into anything. They're just random things that seem to work for a lot of people, and we'll have plenty of time for questions and answers about anything. So come with questions, try stuff out, tell me what works great, and tell me what's not working at all, and we'll help you figure that out, okay? So thank you for coming. It was great seeing you, and have a great holiday. Have a nice Thanksgiving. See you later. Bye, guys.